One. Welcome to a special dual promotion episode here. It's between the Grip Strip podcast and Everything F1, mainly because the person that runs the Grip Strip podcast, that's me, Philip Matthew, is with one of the main people that's part of Everything F1, and that's Tom Downey. What's going on, mate?
Hi, Phil. I'm very well. How are you, mate?
We're chilling here, going on both sides of the pond. We're doing the uncensored F1 recap of 22 season before we lead into the second half of the year where Max Verstappen will win his first legitimate world championship.
No,
Um,
second, but
it's a second world championship on paper, and he'll win that, and he'll probably win next week. But I'll be more interested in what's happening behind, like how Ferrari will fuck up and how Lewis Hamilton and George Russell will be building up with the Mercedes crew now that they're not as busy with Formula E bullshit since Stoffel Van Dorn won them another world championship. And Susie Wolf isn't busy being a team principal. She can go and be back to being Toto's massage woman. But with that, I mean, there's the reality is for us, we didn't know each other until we got on Grid Talk. So thanks to George and everybody there, and then because if it wasn't for Grid Talk, there's a lot of great people in that group, and we wouldn't have met. And then we wouldn't have been able to have conversations and talk about not just racing but life. And I think it's cool how it's the positive thing about motorsports where I can be here in the US and New Jersey and you can be in England, and you have a passion for Formula One and motorsport, and I have that same passion for motorsport, and we're able to come together because we have that. And it's a platform that's been good. It has brought, I mean, obviously we see the good and the bad. It's just life, unfortunately, how effed up life is. But we're two of the people that really just don't give a fuck, and I think that's what makes us unique amongst the group. Plenty of people that are very nice and cool and honest and
yeah,
funny, and they you get some eye candy, you get some not so eye candy like us, and then you
yep.
go and you get unfiltered, you get filtered, you get people who are dads like George, you get people who are definitely not going to be dads, or people who really shouldn't be like me. It all balances out. It's kind of what it's a small microcosm of this F1 fandom that a lot of us haven't been affected by Drive to Survive either, which also helps because we're real F1 fans. I guess that's a whole other distinction we should get into, but I'll let you talk. I've been talking for a couple minutes here.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Yeah, one thing I want to pick up on is you said I'm over here in England. I'm not in England. I'm in Wales. Um,
Sorry.
which to someone like yourself, that'd be like me saying you're in Canada. That's probably the easiest distinction I could make.
I
But
wouldn't mind. It's nice over there.
yeah, no, that's fair enough. Yeah, no, it's no, yeah, no. I just want to echo everything that you just said. We met through such a unique, a unique is probably the word I'd use, walk of life, where one day we ended up on a podcast together, and you're sort of 5 6 hours behind, and obviously we have differing opinions of who our favorite drivers are, obviously, but we also share some similar opinions in that Latifi is shit, and and yeah, it's just it's funny how sort of like in a world where everything feels so toxic, we've got this little nugget of something good, and it's and yeah, I'm looking forward to doing a sort of slightly more uncensored one, because I do censor myself when I'm on Grid Talk, because we have quite a diverse audience, for lots of young people listening, and I don't want to get caught effing and blinding due to monetization reasons.
Yeah.
And I do have some sometimes interesting opinions, and perhaps some interesting ways to describe me things which some people have picked up on. So yeah, hopefully as we get more into it, more of these things will start sort of flowing out.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first of many, hopefully many. It's the way that Formula One schedule is, they're expanding it these days, and it's getting longer and longer. It's almost akin to NASCAR schedule, but it's going all over the world, so it's really not really logical, and it's going to become an issue, I think, over time. But it also gives us opportunities to kind of do some of these off the wall episodes here. I mean, the reality is, I think we just said we're just going to go and have a conversation, and fundamentally, we could go either way. We could go on the Latifi is shit argument, and I already was kind of thinking of something on that, and we could leave your boy last but not least. And I think that would be the way to do it, because he will be the world champion this year. They are going to win the Constructors Championship this year. I think at the end of the day, it probably is respect to them, even though in my mind, I'm going to leave that alone. I'll leave that alone for what I was about to say, because we can go and start with Williams, the great legendary team that once upon a time housed world champions on a regular basis, like
Nigel Mansell and
Nigel.
Obviously, the ill-fated state with Ayrton Senna and Damon Hill. I mean, I know he wasn't a champion when he was at. Oh no, of course he was.
No, 96.
96, yeah.
Jacques Villeneuve.
God, yeah.
And 97
was Damon Hill.
And after Damon Hill, and there's PK, that racist prick, and then KK Rosberg, who raised the tool. The great Alan Jones, first Australian Formula One world champion, became great sportsman and statesman for the country as he went on, drove V8 supercars and the like over the upcoming years, drove for Haas, not Gene Haas, Carl Haas in F1, in the Lola Ford, before he retired from open wheel racing. Williams over the years used to be that team, and when I first started watching, it was them, and then certain M. Schumacher came along and kind of interrupted that whole
tore
thing.
It up
with Benetton, which through about 18 different remakes is now Alpine. But he started there and went off to the Scuderia and redid everything. But in that time, Williams was the team, Williams Renault, and they had, Canon, they had Camel sponsorship, then they had the Rothman sponsorship.
That Elf.
Elf with the French
fuel. Yeah.
And then they had Winfield cigarettes, which I don't ever remember seeing them here. I think that's a British tobacco brand, I would assume. I don't know. I never remember Winfield, but
it's probably a bit before my time, because I wasn't born until 1994. So
yeah, no, it was that. Yeah, that was in the late '90s. So you're a young buck. I was in middle school around that time, getting into high school when Williams started sucking, and then they got the BMW program, and they had the compact car, which looked like the old Bradlams, which is where I kind of went back and started rooting for them, because I was Juan Pablo Montoya guy, and he was one of the only people that didn't give a crap about Michael Schumacher. He's like, oh, he didn't see me. I can't even believe it. Yeah, that's just like impossible. I'm like, if you couldn't see me, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. That's Juan Pablo Montoya. That's why people like him here. He's beloved in multiple levels, because he has no filter, but the guy can bring it. And he can still bring it at like whatever, 50 years old or whatever the hell he is now. He's been doing it. For me, with Juan Pablo Montoya, it goes way back from when I first started watching racing, and he ran in a regional series here in the United States called the Barber Saab Championship, a little open wheel category. So you can imagine it's a Saab engine, so it's a piece of shit. But then but he drove with other guys that actually became decent drivers and whatever. But he was the guy. He was the fastest guy. I'm like, who's this Juan Pablo Montoya? And then little did we know that he was going to be a guy who world renowned, won in multiple types of racing, and is still racing now with his son in the LMP2 category here in IMSA. I'm surprised that some of these factories haven't given him a call, because he is a IMSA champion, won for Acura, for Penske. And so the point we're trying to make is Williams at one point was the team that you wanted to be at. And they used to be a team that had great race car drivers. I mean, we could say whatever about Alex Albon, but the guy that they have in their second seat probably until the end of this year, I think he's going to be replaced. Nicholas Latifi is a nice guy. Steph Wentworth used to be a guest here before she became big time and got on TV and other media conglomerates. She loved Nicholas Latifi, but he sucks. And I mean, the reality of the world is, I think Callum Ilott needs a teammate at Juncos Hollander in the IndyCar series. They're looking to expand to a 2-car team, and I think Nicholas Latifi, whether it's there or Formula E, has probably got options. I think if you're an LMP2 and you have as much money as he has, he could go and get into an LMP seat if he really wanted to as well. So it's not like he's going to be screwed and he's going to be bad off. He can go and make plenty of Lavazza coffee, Tom, and I think he'd be okay. But to be honest, he sucks.
Yeah, he's he'll get a seat somewhere. He'll get a seat at I think Formula E might be a decent shout. Or maybe if he goes over to IndyCar or someone like that, something a bit less, where he can sort of just get his head down, just because he carries a lot of sponsorship with him wherever he goes, and his dad obviously takes a lot of money. I mean, his dad's a part owner in McLaren Group, so maybe he ends up
there.
But maybe he ends up in something like that. McLaren, is it Extreme E, the like electric SUV off-roading stuff, which possibly
they have drivers, they have a team already.
McLaren have got people everywhere.
Yeah.
Not too dissimilar from the whole Oscar Piastri Alpine thing. They had the thing with Alex Palou, where Chip Ganassi announced him and McLaren announced him. It's like, well, what the fuck? Am I racing here? Am I racing there?
It became a thing that everybody said we were signed by McLaren and Zach Brown. I made that reference. I think there's other people I made that reference over the last couple of months since the whole Palou thing came up. Then Oscar Piastri came up too. We still have Felix Rosenqvist in the lurch. He's another one. So we don't know. We don't really know who. I think for sure we know Pato O'Ward has an IndyCar deal and a testing development contract with McLaren for Formula One.
Yeah.
Alexander Rossi has a contract for IndyCar. Colton Herta has a Formula One developmental testing contract for McLaren. And that's just IndyCar. You have Rosenqvist, who might go one of two places. You have Palou, who doesn't know where he's going to go. You have Oscar Piastri, who's probably going to replace Daniel Ricciardo, which will be its own interesting discussion here in a little bit. Lando Norris is their number one driver.
He's not going anywhere.
And they basically are going to build around him, but I think they're trying to solidify their team and basically say, okay, this is going to be our team. We're going to build around these two guys, and this is how we're going to get ourselves back. Akin to what Williams would like to do, but may not ever get there. Part of the reason why Andretti isn't being allowed to get into Formula One is because of the likes of Doralton, the likes of Sauber do not want a team that could have a little bit more support and structure, and also getting Alpine support as an engine supplier could be an issue in regards to the monies they're going to get too.
I struggle to see how Williams are going to even improve, because last year they were actually beginning to make some good progress. Yeah. It was either 2021 or 2020. They changed their car's design philosophy, where it went from a low rake to a high rake. Part of me wants to say 2021 because we had the regulation change. I can't remember. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But it's just. It just seems to have gone backwards.
Yeah.
And it's just, I know we had new regulation changes come in for this year that were supposed to be last year. And, some teams have taken some like a duck to water, like Ferarri, although the strategy is still stuck in fucking 1942 or something.
Yeah.
They just seem to implode at every given opportunity, which we'll get into. As for... just the Ferrari, Williams. They're just, I don't know. They're just struggling to improve. Period.
Yeah, and it's sad. I'm a little older. I generally run older than most of the crew on Grid Talk, and even with my co-host Josh on Grip Strip. I got at least 10 years on him. And I remember the end of the heyday with Williams when they were the team, and
Yeah.
they had they had the active suspension. There was a time I
But just,
remember when Nigel moved and essentially replaced Michael Andretti in kart, and Michael moved to Formula One with the whole nightmare McLaren scenario, and then they signed Alan Prost to drive the Williams, and Damon Hill became the number 2 driver. And that car, after 3 races, was not looking the greatest. And then it just won everything after that. And they won the world championship, and it was dominating, and it was easy. I
yeah.
remember those days. That was my first full year watching Formula One. I was a Senna guy. I'll always be a Senna guy for life. And that was rough year, but it wasn't a rough year for him in the sense that he was getting $1 million a race. Even though the car was a piece of shit, he drove it really good. He won 5 races in that thing and finished second in the world championship in a car that probably didn't belong there. Probably getting to somebody that could do the same kind of thing here in the second half of the season. But Williams has dropped, and I guess we'll bring in Albon into this. Albon has been driven through the Red Bull ringer. You are a Red Bull guy, mainly with Max, but Max isn't a Red Bull development driver. He was a Mercedes guy that, because they weren't going to give him the opportunity to move up as quickly, his Red Bull was willing to give him that opportunity at 16, 17 years old to run in Formula One, and he moved there, and it has become a very fruitful, beneficial partnership. They essentially stemmed the tide of the leaking oil that is the Red Bull driver development program. While they weren't they weren't in a positive state where, outside of Daniel Ricciardo, where they didn't really have drivers that were ready, but they hurried them up. And then basically because of One-Eyed Marco and Toast and that knob, Christian Horner, basically ran guys like Alex Albon, Pierre Gasly, insert, I think, half of Formula E and like a quarter of LMP sports cars into the abyss. And, like Alex Albon this year has done really good relative to what he's got. And I don't think he's going to leave the grid now. I think he's going to be there for a little while because Red Bull wants him out there. But what is the end game for him? Is he going back to AlphaTauri because they're going to get rid of Yuki Tsunoda after next year? What is the end game? Because Williams doesn't, in the end, really need the Red Bull driver development. They have a perfectly fine driver development program. They have a guy in Formula 2 that's ready, or could be ready, and could do essentially the same crap that we've got going on with that team right now. You have a woman who knows, we can get into that with Jamie Chadwick and how good she really is. But if Formula One wants a woman, that's an option. And then they have Zach O'Sullivan. I think they have a couple of guys in like F3, F4. They have driver development that they'd be better off just doing that. If they're going to suck, be a development hub. It's kind of like how they do in MotoGP and in other series, and even in Premier League, where there are teams that are just meant to go and have build up players, give them the time and the top level, and then the bigger teams sign them.
Well, Williams, right, and to an extent Aston Martin, because obviously they're all Mercedes powered, or Mercedes customer teams. I always thought this about Williams when they started to get a bit shit, sort of around 2017. 2017 they were still all right, but I think Bottas and Massa perhaps outdrove the car. When Stroll came in 2018, it was like, oh, so this is what we've got. 2017 Stroll came in. My bad. But how long he's been around? He's
another one.
It's just the Canadians. When you see him get on the track, you just hide behind your sofa in fear of them crashing into each other like they did in Melbourne. It's just maybe they got, I don't know, maybe they put maple syrup instead of engine oil in. I don't know. But it's they're just. It's just that Williams has just been a bit. They've been crap since 2018. And I know Stroll got a podium in Azerbaijan in 2017 or 2018.
Yeah.
And I know he started on the second there in Monza in 2017 when it was hammering down with rain. But that's because half the field had engine penalties.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think he started on the outside of the front row that race.
Yeah, I'm sure he started P2, net P2.
And then he started on the front row in a whatever pink Mercedes on that restart.
In Turkey in 2020,
he started
put it
on
on
pole.
pole.
Yeah,
Yeah, I remember that.
On the restart at Monza when Lewis went and made the mistake.
When he pitted when the
pit lane was closed, and when they did the restart, he was on the front row when Pierre Gasly ended up passing him and winning the Italian Grand Prix.
Yeah, that was a good day.
That was a good day.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's the Williams is just
it's just bad.
it is. It's just bad, and I know obviously we've just spent like 20 minutes or if not longer waxing lyrical about their previous drivers and all their history. History doesn't mean shit in today's world. Formula One is very different to what it was then. If you think about where Formula One was 10 years ago, it was 10 years ago Williams won their last race with Pastor Maldonado at Barcelona. And if you think about what the sport was like, if you think back to that season, what the cars like, what the engines were like, what the safety was like, we had no halo. Hands hadn't been around that long. We still had the V8s. We had the sort of skinny rear wing era, which when you look back on them now, they look like toy cars.
Yeah.
Especially compared to the sort of 2017 to 2021 cars. So it's a Williams. Yeah, they just need to, even if they, just for like a decade or so, if they have perhaps an agreement with Mercedes that if Mercedes junior drivers sit in the Williams for a couple of years, like George Russell did.
Yep.
This is kind of thing that could have saved Manor Racing back in 2017 as well, because obviously Esteban Ocon started with them when he replaced Rio Haryanto. 2016 I think that was, if I didn't say that already. Williams, they can't live off the history. And yes, it's great to look back at what they achieved, but F1 you have to be looking a year, 18 months, 2 years ahead, because people might think that teams go, this season's done. The teams relax. If anything, when the season's done, that's when the teams really ramp up. Yeah. It's like there's the old story of Fernando Alonso wanting people to come in on New Year's Day, because I think when he was at Renault or maybe Ferrari, I can't remember, because he wanted to get the development going. So Williams can't afford to be like looking. They can't afford to be looking behind them, or sort of like thinking, remember in 1997 when Damon Hill won, and think back to when Nigel Mansell won and all the rest of it. It's just they're a name that is synonymous with F1, and to see them at the back of the grid is a crying shame.
Yeah,
they need to accept that they're shit and that they need to do something different, and they need to be in a different state of mind. They can't be thinking, in a couple of years we want to be challenging for wins and titles and the rest of it. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's not in their current state.
No, it's not going to happen. And maybe with the engine change in 2026, we might see something. But I think over the next few years, they just need to be a sort of breeding ground for Mercedes, because Mercedes haven't got any junior drivers. Hamilton's not going to be around forever. And Mercedes are going to run into the issue that Red Bull had a few years ago and that Ferrari have got at the moment, which is where they've got so many drivers and they've got enough seats. So Williams it's disappointing to see, because it's even as a sort of like relatively young kid, and then when I started to get sort of about like 9-10. I remember I'm at my parents' house at the minute. When we moved into this house, I remember I had a PlayStation 2, and I think it might still be upstairs actually, the old Williams F1 style steering wheel, because I was playing Gran Turismo.
Oh wow!
And it's and it had the gear shift paddles there. It had the clutch paddles down there, or whichever way around they are, and it had the rev counter, and it had the big BMW logo and it had the Williams logo. And it's things like that, and I wonder if that's why I like BMW broadcasts, because I'm on my fourth at the moment,
Ah,
and it's just there's a part of it which is just like just I associate sort of like that era of F1 with when I was young, and that is sort of like one of my early memories of Formula One. So it'll take something monumental and for things outside of their control to change for them to get back up to the top. And I think they just need to accept that it's not going to happen.
yeah, it's not going to happen initially. I think with the push of what do you call Liberty and other things, I think Logan Sargent, who was so close to going to IndyCar and being in the 14 car and having the same kind of nightmare scenario that Kyle Kirkwood has had this year, people don't understand how close that was to happening. But Williams came in and he's done a good enough job, top 5 in the points right now. He drove for Charouz in F3 last year, which is a terrible team, and brought them up and made them relevant. He was so close to winning F3 the year before that, and then everybody else that was around him essentially either went to F2 or got something going on for them, and he was the one left holding the bag. He's the guy that if they really want to get some relevance, if they're going to suck, they're going to suck. But go and have Alexander Albon as your veteran. You have Logan Sargent, grind. It's not going to be pretty. But the fact is, for TV sake, because they've signed a new deal, ESPN paid a lot of money to Sky to keep the current setup that they have for the races and all that and qualifying and whatnot. So that's a piece. It's a start. If Logan Sargent shows potential over time, who knows what can come in due time in Formula One as the years go on. That, I think, is the way they have to go. Now, one team that isn't going that way, at least initially, is Aston Martin. We started in on Stroll. I am guilty of, well, not guilty of. I basically say Stroll's a piece of shit, and I say it a lot because he is. His dad's a cocksucker, and so is Lance. And Connor Moore does a great job of impersonating both of them. And he's been a mediocrity in Formula One more or less his entire time. Yes, he has a couple of podiums, a pole, whatever. But his arrogance, his arrogance relative to his actual ability is something that just
laughable.
And it's like, I get it. Like, it's almost like he watched Jacques Villeneuve and thinks he's Jacques Villeneuve, except when Jacques Villeneuve was at his peak, he legitimately was one of the best drivers in the world. He had a 4-year stretch from 1994 to 97 when he won the IndyCar Rookie of the Year, finished second in the Indianapolis 500. In 95, he won the IndyCar Championship and won the Indianapolis 500. In 96, he won the Formula One Rookie of the Year and probably could have beat Damon Hill if they didn't want Damon, of course, to win. And I mean, I'm saying this as somebody who rooted for Damon Hill. Jacques was better by the end of the year. In 97, he beats Ferrari because Michael Schumacher decided he was going to run over him the way he tried to run over Damon Hill in Adelaide.
Adelaide, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So he did the same thing to Jacques Villeneuve, except he destroyed his car and he got essentially thrown out of the championship. Jacques Villeneuve ends up winning that race. In turn, he essentially turns around the McLaren scenario because David Coulthard is told to pull over for Mika Hakkinen, which ended up giving Mika Hakkinen his first career Formula One win. That 97 Jerez race when, and in 3, what is it? Was it Jacques Villeneuve, Heinz-Harald Frentzen, Michael Schumacher all had the same qualifying
position time. Yeah.
So, I mean, that is one insane race. I miss Jerez because that's a way better track than Catalunya ever will be. It's a better motorcycle track than Catalunya ever will be. But we still go to Catalunya. But I don't know. That's beside the point. When it comes to, it speaks to, El Plan deciding to take over for Sebastian Vettel. And it's weird because there's not much, Tom, that I've seen that makes me think that Aston Martin, they got rid of their Valkyrie hypercar program that I think would have made sense that, okay, he wants to be a statesman. He wants to eventually go to the sports car thing. I think that's part of what they told Vettel, but then that kind of went away. And then on top of it, Vettel's become environmental guy. And I think he's just kind of gotten sick and tired of the way Formula One is, and he doesn't want to be there anymore. And not being competitive doesn't help when you're a 4-time world champion.
A champion, yeah. I've got to be honest. I think Vettel's just fallen out of love with Formula One. I think he was sold the dream of Aston Martin, because obviously they were racing point at the time. And if you look, when Vettel obviously agreed to join them during the 2020 season, when he was having that dog shit year at Ferrari, Ferrari were just awful. They got knocked out in Q1, I think, in Belgium, or might have just made it through Q2. I can't remember, but anyway, they were shit that year. Yeah, really shit. And then you had Force India or Racing Point or Pink, whatever they were doing.
Tracing Point,
yeah, or the Pink Mercedes or whatever, yeah. When they were doing pretty well, and obviously, Stroll got pole position that year. Perez got his first win at Sakir at the end of the year, and it's just like, so as far as Vettel was concerned, he was probably thinking, I've struck gold here. We'll call them the Silverstone team because a bit like Alpine, etc. They're the Enstone team. I think Vettel was probably thinking, effectively, like, next year I'm going to be back up there. I'm going to be battling for podiums. And yeah, he got a podium in Baku, and he had it in Hungary before he got disqualified for the fuel irregularity, which is a bit of a piss take, but rules are rules. Yeah. But then this year they've just been awful this year, and he's fallen out of love with F1. Makes me wonder, what on earth are they paying Fernando Alonso to get him to go there? But also Alonso is king of doing shocking career moves. Yep. When he signed for McLaren, when he still had another year on his Renault contract and won another world championship, then in 2006, went to McLaren in 2007, got done by Lewis, and then had a shit fit at Hungary. And wouldn't let all that stuff, and then you almost got he did get beaten by Lewis that year.
No, they tied.
Of course they tied. Yeah.
Because Ron Dennis didn't call Lewis in one lap. He kept Lewis out at the Chinese Grand Prix, made his tires slick. He spins out into the freaking random gravel sand trap in the pit entry because Ron Dennis he's another one. He's another moron. I mean, between the way he handled, it's like he handled Senna Prost the way he did. And essentially, he allowed to have Senna Prost 2.0 in a much lighter form. And in the process, not only gave away the Drivers' Championship, they gave away the Constructors, and then they got
thrown out, didn't they?
And then they got thrown out because of Nigel Stepney. So it's like at that point, Ron Dennis should have not been allowed to run that team anymore. Yeah. But then he was allowed to do that. They went and bought Honda back, and then Honda and them shit the bed. And it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, and then we had 2 years of McLaren Renault or something.
Yeah,
in 2018. Yeah, and then 2019.
But that's where they were able to bring in Lando and kind of build him up. Yeah, which in its own right, I guess, is good. But
yeah. Side note: interesting fact about Nigel Stepney, and I don't know how I know this, but I do. He was killed in an accident on a British motorway in a county called Surrey. He was,
Surrey.
Yeah, he was. I don't know if it was suicide or what, but he was. I'm sure I read he was broken down at the side of the road and he got hit by a lorry or something, and he was killed.
Oh God.
Yeah. So it's it's a pretty horrible end. That was some years ago as well. So yeah, I don't know why I know that. I must have read it somewhere once.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. But just going back to Aston Martin and Alonso, it's just like. It's going to be interesting next year because do you think this is all part of L plan or what? It's like last year he was sorry, not last year, but you mentioned about the Honda, the McLaren Honda era when Alonso was shouting GP2 engine, GP2. Yeah. And he's just I think that's partly why he left in 2018 because he was just fed up.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously he went to go and try and win IndyCar, didn't, and then has come back to F1. It's just, oh God, it's yeah, I can't wait. It's going to be an absolute spectacle
Yeah.
because oh my God, Alonso and Lawrence Stroll butting heads. Oh, that's going to be epic. That's going to be absolute.
When the media
Oh,
thing is
Phil,
just going
Drive
to
to
be,
Survive. They're going to be
yeah,
sitting there just like, come on, then. Yeah, it's going to be
because they're
that's
going
going
to
to be
suck.
amazing. Yeah,
They're going to suck. There's not much that we have seen so far this year from this organization, the Silverstone team, that makes you think that they're going anywhere. If they were going
no,
to get rid of Lance and put somebody that has talent in that car, maybe. Fernando Alonso's just holding on for dear life because he doesn't know what to do with himself. He's old. He should just go back, call Toyota because that's about the only bridge he hasn't burned in motorsports, and go and say, hey, do you need somebody to go and work, and we can go and maybe do something in America and IMSA, and we'll kind of like dovetail a program so he can go and work his American thing, and then he can run Dakar and do all that crap like he did in that special. That's what he should
yeah,
have
it's
done.
just
That because that was the only time I've ever looked at Fernando Alonso, other than his, prodigious, talent that he has. Yes, he's the guy that slayed Michael Schumacher. You cannot take that away from him. After a guy had won 5 consecutive world championships, he's the guy that beat him 2 consecutive years and essentially retired him, albeit it was mainly because Massa was going to lose his ride. But the fact is he did that. But
yeah,
everything he did after that for essentially now 15 years has been questionable outside of, one Indy 500 run for Andretti Autosport, and then his Toyota run in IMSA and or not IMSA, in the
Le Mans.
WEC, Le Mans, and then also in other entities. You think, like, I'd rather the guy go and say, oh, you know what? I just want to try something new. I'm going to get real crazy. I'm going to be a world rally driver.
Yeah,
Like that would make more sense than him driving around in the back in an Aston Martin. He just wants to hold on because he hates Lewis so bad that he just wants to see him flame out or something, but he ain't gonna flame out. There's a difference between what Lewis's career was. He made one move. He stayed probably a little too long in McLaren because it kind of went away because it's McLaren. They do that sort of thing. They don't know how to make a reliable car. Kimi Räikkönen paid for that. And I say that as Kimi Räikkönen is going to make his NASCAR debut here later this afternoon or this evening in your neck of the woods. He's gonna cup debut, and they screwed him over. Then Lewis and Jensen got screwed over by it. And then after that, McLaren has not been the same team anyway. He made one move in part because of the late Nicky Lauda, and he convinced him there would be something there.
yeah.
And it
What a
has
move it
paid off
was.
fruitfully, and literally now, minus what's going on this year, whatever, for a good part of this year, he made the right move. And in the end, he has changed his perspective and the way he is in a lot of ways, in a lot of avenues, relative to what Alonso is. Because now Alonso's just driving himself further down the grid. At one time, he was in the best car. Then he was at Ferrari. Then he's back at Renault, which is middle of the road, or whatever, however many different iterations they've been. Then he went back to McLaren, which had gotten down to where that team is. And now you're at freaking Stroll F1.
Yeah,
That's how you're going to end your career. Like, you're just either holding on for dear life, you're getting a really, really good paycheck, or you just want something bad to happen to somebody and you're just an asshole. I don't understand what the end game is with that, but whatever. It's Fernando Alonso. He's the biggest genius in the room in his own mind. So whatever.
yeah. You should, yeah. I think sports cars are closed cockpit are better for Alonso because he can fit himself in the driver's seat and his ego in the passenger seat.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
So he's yeah. He's just, I don't know, mate. He's just
Yeah,
He's
and
just
all the gas he puts out of his asshole, he can use as recharging for the brake system too, for the
yeah.
MGUH.
He'd be great in a hydrogen powered series. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
He's maybe he's playing bingo to see how many teams he can actually race for. Because he must be at about more or less half the grid by now.
He's done
it's gonna be
2 stints
teams.
at McLaren. He's done 3 stints at the Silverstone team. He's done with the Endstone team. He's done, now he's doing the Silverstone team and
he's on
Ferrari.
Ferrari. Yeah. Yeah.
So is it Alpha next? I guess it's Alpha. It's Alpha Audi because they're gonna go to Audi supposedly.
Yeah.
And then or it's gonna be Williams. That's literally as
It's
far.
it's not going to be Williams, but if he
Yeah.
sort of continues to slap, well, he's not going to go back to McLaren. Because I think he probably burned a lot of bridges. I mean, Zach Brown likes him, but no, Piastri's going to go to McLaren.
They won't have a
Um,
seat.
no, they won't have a seat. I never thought I'd see the day where he'd burn his bridges with Renault, but there's Alonso. We shouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised. He's not gone back to Ferrari because he burnt his bridges there. Yeah, he's not going to go to Mercedes because Hamilton's there.
If
Yeah,
Andretti comes in, maybe but then that's an Alpine, that's a Renault power
no,
unit.
yeah, exactly. And will Alpine really say, "Oh, we're happy to have Alonso in one of our power cars"? No, they're taking time to get fucked.
Yeah.
They're not going to want him there because if he starts shouting GP2 engine again, or imagine if we start shouting GP3 engine, they'll be absolutely furious.
Yeah.
So no, I don't know. To be honest, I don't really care about Aston Martin when they came into F1. I was like, oh yeah, I like them, but Stroll's a twat. His dad's a twat.
Yeah.
Alonso's a bit of a part of me likes Alonso. Another part of me thinks, just get in the bin. He's just very arrogant. I'm just looking forward to the spectacle of when it all blows up.
Oh yeah, we need to start, like, we have time between now and start of next year, but I think part of the predictions we have to make on the Grid Talk side is how long does it take before the Alonso Lawrence Stroll relationship implodes next year? Is it Miami? I think it's Miami.
I think it's preseason. Honestly,
I think he holds out till Miami, and him and Lawrence will be fighting on the fake marina. After qualifying.
When Alonso's sitting there in his deck chair like he likes to do.
Yeah. All right, so let's
move up the grid a bit.
We'll move up the grid because it was a reference to Lance Stroll, but it went into insulting Alonso, which makes me happy. Zhou Guan Yu, the rookie driver for the Alpha Sauber team, a lot of questions about him, his validity of being in Formula One, part of the Alpine driver development program, had one in F2, but he has a lot of money, but it hasn't exactly worked out to where they've gotten as much money as they wanted from China. But in the sense of Zhou as a driver, of course, he had the serious accident at Silverstone, which thankfully he got out alive, and the halo and all the other great safety measures that Formula One has brought up. That team, they used to be the BMW team. They had Mercedes support. They've had lots of things. Red Bull started their Formula One journey in 95 actually, or 96. 93 through 95, they were still the Mercedes junior effort. They had black cars with just the Mercedes Ilmor engines. Carl Wendlinger drove with JJ Leto in 93, and then it was Carl Wendlinger with Heinz Harald Frentzen, and then Wendlinger got hurt seriously at Monaco but came back. His best days were really with the Viper program, so I was grateful to Carl Wendlinger. He was able to come back and recover, but he did great work for Dodge Vipers here in America and in Europe. But back in those days, I mean, Sauber's had this long history. They got the BMW deal. Robert Kubica won a race there, but ever since then, it's kind of been weird. It's been a weird decade and a half for them in Formula One. Checo Perez came in there, did some work for like a year or two or whatever when he first entered F1, when he was considered a ride buyer. But I mean, their identity. What is their? I mean, their identities are eighth place.
They're weird, yeah. They were for quite a while. There's been a sort of like Ferrari junior team, because obviously Leclerc was there, but they also had a long time when they were the national Swedish bank of F1 because they had Marcus Ericsson in that seat.
Yeah.
And it was actually Sauber that cost Manor their place in F1. Because it was up until Brazil. Because side note, again, it's just how weird my brain is. Pascal Wehrlein,
Bianchi,
2016, Manor were plumb last in the constructors, and they scored a point at the Red Bull Ring with Pascal Wehrlein. He finished 10th because he'd won a sports car series, and so he knew the track like the back of his hand. And then Felipe Nasser, not Massa, Felipe Nasser, scored 2 points at that rain-soaked Brazilian Grand Prix in 2016, which then bumped Manor out. So that's I've never really liked Sauber because of that, because I quite liked Manor. They were sort of like the plucky underdogs.
Yeah. They were the only ones that made it. They were the only ones that they were the last man standing of all those teams that tried to come in.
Sort of like 2010, 2012, whenever it was. Yeah. So it's so Sauber, Alfa Romeo, whatever you want to call them, we'll probably be calling them Audi next year. They're a weird entity, because obviously, it's odd because Sauber historically have backed Mercedes and used Ilmor powertrain, and which has obviously become Mercedes Mercedes AMG high performance, whatever they're called, up in Brixworth, which is a place, which is up in Northamptonshire. So they're an odd one that they're now they're a Swiss-based Italian-backed team, and it's just like that's so backwards. I don't quite know how that all works, but it does work. Their form directly correlates to how well that Ferrari are doing, mainly due to the engine. So 2018 they were pretty decent. I remember Charles having some decent results, and Ericsson had a couple of okay results but couldn't keep his seat. Then in 2019, Kimi and Giovinazzi were doing all right. Giovinazzi was doing Giovinazzi things. But they were doing all right. Then 2020 they were awful. In 2021 they were getting a bit better, but they still weren't that good. And then actually Kimi retired. And then this year they've been decent. Zhou Guanyu's an interesting one, because I was very skeptical when he came in, because I thought, pay driver, blah blah blah. A bit like Latifi, nice guy, had a couple of all right results in Formula 2. Never really looked to be challenging for the championship, and was in F2 for a few years. He's had a couple of podiums. I think Joe had a couple of wins in F2, but when you started hearing his name mentioned, it was like, well, it's going to come with money, and it obviously has come with money. I think if you look at his results this year on paper, they don't reflect the season he's had, because reliability has cost him a lot. It cost him in Baku, obviously. He's in a fairly decent position in Silverstone before he had that horror crash. He's had 3 or 4 races where he could have quite easily scored points, but hasn't been able to because his car shit the bed, or or specifically his engine has shit the bed. That Ferrari powertrain. So it's I don't think it's an accurate representation of his season. I think he's not going to challenge for the championship. He's not the caliber of Charles, of Max, of Lewis, the sort of like upper echelons of F1. He's not that level. He's not that good. But he'll be good enough for sort of like some seasons in the midfield. I'd probably compare him to sort of like Nick Heidfeld type level.
A little lower, I would say, because Nick Heidfeld did have a very nice lower Formula career. And he is a Le Mans winner too.
True. Yes. Okay. Maybe a bit lower than a Nick Heidfeld, but someone who could sort of like spend a while in the midfield and have some decent results, but ultimately won't be remembered for anything spectacular. He might get like the odd podium here or there in his career, but I don't think he's going to exactly be shitting rainbows.
Yeah. That's the thing. I mean, you look at the list. I was just, while you were going over, Sauber and going over Guan Yu, I mean, the list of drivers that have driven for this team has become pretty long over the years, especially, with all the different things. I mean, you got, I mentioned Wendlinger and Frentzen and JJ Leto, which they have missing here. I don't know how they have him missing. But, you have the likes of course, Checo Perez ran for them, Robert Kubica, Felipe Massa made his debut for them, Kimi Räikkönen, another reference to Kimi today. That's twice. Heidfeld. Vettel made his Formula One debut because he was a BMW junior driver for them at Indianapolis at the U.S. Grand Prix, scored points in his first race. In relief of Kubica after he had his massive crash at the Canadian Grand Prix the year after he won it. The Kamui Kobayashi, who is loved by so many because of how aggressive he is. He's essentially like him and Takuma Sato are like have to be brothers or something. Eclair, Verline, who's made a name for himself in Formula E, Gutierrez, who's disappeared from planet Earth Giovinazzi was dead last in Formula E, so that was pretty pathetic. Ericsson has done well for himself now in IndyCar. Nazar has become a great sports car race. Kobayashi, of course, is with Toyota, so he's done well for himself. De La Rosa has had a long career working for a lot of teams. McLaren as a test driver, most famously. Jean Alesi ended one of his last teams he drove. Yeah. Jean Alesi, one of the last teams he drove for was Sauber. Great Johnny Herbert, who now works for Sky. One of his last teams he drove for was Sauber. And then Jacques Villeneuve in 2006 drove for them in his final Formula One season. They've had a lot of drivers there. Be remiss. I think since it's taken this constructors tone, I kind of would figure we'll change it. So Valtteri Bottas is kind of in a rebuilding mode after all these years at Mercedes, people thinking that he was not. There's plenty of people who said that he still had talent and he was being held back. People saying, oh, they give Lewis everything, which is interesting. But I think Valtteri Bottas has had a couple of good years there at Mercedes. He did his job. They won all those constructors championships. He won races. Could he have been better? Sure. Was he an elite? Is he an elite level driver? Is he that world championship level like you talked about, Tom?
No.
But he's the next level. And the point is he's back in a small team. He's the lead dog. He's happy in life outside of Formula One. He's happy with things with this team. They don't really have anything going on. I don't think they're going to get rid of this driver combination for a while unless something major comes along. Bottas has done a good enough job. He's had the same kind of issues Zhou has had with the issues with the engine, and I think that's part of why they are not as far up. The fact is they're sixth. Considering last year they were ninth in the Constructors Championship, to be sixth this year, they did a good job with the car. They have a solid driver lineup. That's all you can really ask for. It's something that Williams has to aspire to, to try to be that. Aston Martin is another one, to be fair, for the amount of money they have invested in it. To be 31 points behind Alfa Romeo through the first part of the season is pretty bleak. We'll change it over since it's gotten a constructor's tone. I mentioned the Red Bull guys and mentioned Vettel. We mentioned some of them. Yuki Tsunoda is an interesting character, Tom. He's very aggressive, goes with the whole Japanese kind of character in that sense in recent drivers, but it hasn't really netted many results. Last year, he was very rough around the edges, but they had a much better car. Gasly always seemed to be that guy that would be the best first of the rest kind of thing, qualify really well. This year, they've completely fucked up the car. They're not good, even though they still have the same power unit as the team that's going to win the Constructors Championship. They just seem like they're in a different level. They're like in a different planet. And it's hard to imagine if you're that far off now, how long is it going to take you to get back to relevance with the way the formula is right now. Gasly is a driver that honestly has proven he belongs in Formula One. I think he got railroaded by Red Bull.
100% he did.
And he should have. The point is, they just want a domestique. They just want somebody to lay over, will get good, but they want somebody that'll get points regularly and get top fives, qualified top five. And Gasly was that guy. And who knows, maybe that means Checo Perez doesn't exist in Formula One anymore, but that's what they needed to do to justify their program, but they didn't. Now they have a guy that they bought out from outside who's driven for 2 or 3 organizations, and now he's become the loyal domestique. And the Red Bull driver development program's kind of in a glut because where are you going to put people? You have Yuki Tsunoda because you have a Honda engine. No matter what they rebadge it, it's still Honda. And they have another Japanese driver in Iwasa sitting there. They have the same problem with Honda and MotoGP with Japanese riders and having an issue with seats. So it's kind of interesting how that works out. But Yuki, you won. I mean, he's going to be back next year, but I think it's time. He's got a year and a half to keep a seat, or else he's going the realm of, sports cars, Formula E, et cetera, et cetera.
Tsunoda wouldn't be in F1 if Honda hadn't been Red Bull backers at the time.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest. He was brought in to appease Honda. And he had a decent junior career. He didn't win F2, mind.
Yeah.
He still came in, and he needed. I think I said this last year. I know I said this last year. He needed another season in F2, GP2, whatever you call it, to just develop more.
Mm-hmm.
And AlphaTauri shit the bed by letting Danny Kvyat go, because he was really turning into something at the end of 2020. And I think if AlphaTauri would have continued into 2021 with Gasly and Kvyat, AlphaTauri would have been would have been an even better team. I know Tsunoda got better, but with the one-eyed Sith Lords in charge of that program,
yeah.
I'm a Red Bull fan. I don't like Helmut Marko because he screws with drivers, and he sees them as a sort of, he sees them as something which he can just chuck out with the recycling on a Thursday. It's like, mate, that's not how it works. And it's come back to bite Red Bull because they burnt through so many drivers.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, I get that being in that second Red Bull seat next to Max is going to be a hot seat, and it's going to be, the pressure is going to be relentless. But it didn't work. That's why Danny Rick left. That's why it didn't work for Gasly. That's why it didn't work for Albon.
Kvyat.
They dropped him to give Max a chance. I think it's safe to say it worked out.
It worked out though.
Yeah, but they burn so many bridges with drivers that they didn't have room for anybody. And then when they suddenly realised, oh shit, we need a driver, they only had people in F2 who weren't ready. Because they had the likes of Yuri Vips, who's been booted out of the team for being a racist prick. They had
Daruvala.
They've got Johan Daruvala, who's been in Formula 2 for a couple of years. They've got Liam Lawson on the books. Now they're getting more and more talent coming through. But they had a couple of sort of barren years from like 2018, 2019 to last year, where it's like, shit, we haven't got anybody coming through. Whereas when you looked at Ferrari, they were tripping over drivers.
Yep.
And you looked at Mercedes, they didn't have room for Ocon and Wehrlein. Ocon got released into Alpine, and Wehrlein's just, he's not in F1.
Mm-hmm.
He spent 2017 at Sauber because that was the only seat he could get. It's just, that AlphaTauri, it's the kind of team where you've got to be able to hit the ground running. And, Gasly's been there a long time now. He's going to be there next year.
Mm-hmm.
He needs to move because he's not getting back into that Red Bull. They're not going to give him the seat. So he needs to stop hoping that he's going to get it. Perez has got a 2-year deal now, up until the end of 2024. So, are they really going to put anybody else? Are they really going to move Perez when he's doing exactly what they need of him?
Exactly.
It's just, Red Bull, and we'll talk about the Model 1 if you want, but Red Bull and AlphaTauri, whatever they're called these days, they're going to be stuck now for a couple of years because they got Max. They got Max, who's the lead driver. Perez, who is a good deputy, picks up points, holds off Sainz or obviously it was Hamilton last year, and Bottas last year, and Leclerc this year, and anybody else who might be coming charging through to give Max a big buffer. All the rest of it, which is, they tried having no 1 and 2 driver, and it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So even if they weren't admitted, there is a hierarchy there, and there needs to be. We saw it at Mercedes in 2016 when they didn't have a hierarchy, and look how that turned out. Then when Bottas came, they had a hierarchy. Ferrari have always had a hierarchy, even if they won't say they have at the moment. They have. It's obvious, and for the top teams to work, they need it.
Hmm.
So it's so for Red Bull and AlphaTauri, I think over the next few years they're going to be stuck in this kind of not loop, but they're going to have more and more drivers coming through the bottom who are trying to get their way to the top.
Yeah.
But it's going to be like trying to force people into a train. That train's getting full,
Hmm.
and then they're going to run out. They run out of seats anyway. Sonoda's seat will free up, I think, by the end of 2023, if not end of this season.
Hmm.
Um, so perhaps someone like perhaps Liam Lawson might move up. I think Gasly will move by the end of 2023. Well, in fact, he has to, because what's he
Yeah.
going to do?
Yeah.
Be the Red Bull bitch his entire career? No, that ain't
Yeah.
going to
It's
work.
just, yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah, it's not going to do him any good. Um, so I reckon he should say to Helmut, "Oh, fuck you, but I'm off," and then go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So that whole dynamic. That's part of the problem with having so many people coming through, especially as Formula One drivers get younger and younger. They move to the top quicker and quicker, and they're in the sport longer and longer.
Hmm.
And it's just we've run out of room.
Yeah. And it's like I decided while you were going waxing poetic about the Red Bull driver development program to go and look at the Red Bull driver development program, and my goodness, how many drivers they've had in it. They have 4 drivers in Formula 2, as I mentioned, Iwasa, Lawson, Hauger, Daruvala, all in Formula 2. I think Lawson and Daruvala are teammates, or I might be mistaking who are they with. But then you have in Formula 3 the American Jack Crawford, Johnny Edgar from the UK, and then Isaac Hadjar, the French driver. And then they have 3 drivers in Formula 4, 2 Japanese, and Noel Leon, Mexican driver, and then Arvin Lindblad, British driver in go-karting. And then I was going through all these drivers. They also have Jack Doohan, who had
Oh, of
just left
course,
the
yeah.
program. To go to I think Carlin. Pato. It's funny looking at this list. It's ridiculous, crazy list. I mean, it's funny. You can go through all like Pato or Lucas Hours and DTM. Never heard Harry Thompson or Neil Verhagen. Richard Vachor has been in Formula 2, Formula 3. Sergio Sete Camara, who's in Formula E. I don't know who that guy is. I
He
don't
was
know
trying to
who he
add.
is.
He
Nico Kari,
oh god, yeah.
Lewis Leeds. I've never heard of either of them. Dean Stoneman. I've seen him in sports cars. Callum Ilott, of course, is in IndyCar. Gasly, who's still in Formula One. Alex Lynn in Formula E. Young Carlos Sainz Jr. My goodness, that is a salad. Verstappen, Betske Visser was yeah. Tom Blomqvist, who's a sports car DTM guy. Kvyat, who is also running in the race later this afternoon at Watkins Glen. Callan O'Keefe, Antonio Felix da Costa, Lewis Williamson, Stefan Wackenbauer, that's a good name, Alex Albon, Ricardo, Sean-Eric Verne, Formula E world champion twice, Brendan Hartley, Toyota sports car
God, yeah.
driver, Robert Wickens, who thankfully is now driving again and winning races for Hyundai in the TCR category. Mirko Bortolotti, who's a BMW guy, I think. Michaela Loshin, who used to run an IndyCar. Mika Maki. Jaime Alguersuari, that's a good one. Daniel Juncadella, who drove for Mercedes in DTM. John Edwards, who's still here in America running sports cars. Karun Chandok. And what do you call? I'm blanking, but I'm going to scroll down the range. Karthikeyan was also a Red Bull development driver. Tom Dillman, Stefano Coletti, who went to Indy Cars. Buemi, Formula E world champion. J.K. Vernet, who went to IndyCar and Indy Lights and didn't get a ride. Never heard of that guy or that guy. Vettel, yeah, we've heard of him. Oaks, Muller, he looks like a guy who would be like a killer in some sort of TV action movie. Philippe Albuquerque, who of course is here in America running for Acura. Never seen either of those guys. Neil Yanni, who didn't get to Formula One but has been in sports cars. Philip Bang, being big time driver for BMW. Martin Ragan, yeah, whatever his name is. Colin Fleming. Scott Speed, of course, has had quite a career. Memo Rojas drove here in America in sports cars. Matt Jaskell, he's a great go-kart guy. Karthikeyan Liuzzi, going way back. Norbert Seidler, isn't he like a team principal now these days? Norbert
Maybe
Seidler.
something. I'm not really sure.
Yeah. Matthias Lauda. Okay. Christian Clean. That one was a good one. Him and Liuzzi were the ones swapping that second ride. Freisacker, Paul Edwards, the American. My God, Jesus. Good job, One-Eyed Marco. I mean, he has fed the Formula E and sports car categories with plenty of great drivers. But how many of them have actually made it and done anything of great significance? You could basically name three. That's literally what it is. It's Vettel, it's Verstappen, and it's Ricardo. So that's it. Good job there, Marco. You really are worth all those energy drinks, you cocksucker. Speaking of a team that used to be at the bottom end but has made a recovery this year is the American team, Haas, as other people might say. Kevin Magnussen got signed like 2 days before testing and has jumped into that car and done a really good job. Mick Schumacher in his second year, as per his usual elevator, he goes and starts figuring it out. They've scored some good points, but they're a very inconsistent team. That's always been the case, no matter what, from the beginning, I think, for Haas F1. But I mean, for where they were last year, being the absolute worst with that knobhead, cocksucker, egghead, douchebag, loser.
With his dad as well.
Yeah. Considering where they were and where they are now, it's a lot more positive for sure. And Kevin Magnussen is happy. They have a good energy there. Do they have a long-term significance? I don't know. Ferrari does support them in a lot of ways, so I think in that sense they're going to kind of have relevance. But I wonder about Gene Haas's long-term commitment to this, because how many years they've been in this series and they've never really been better than fourth or fifth in the Constructors Championship. And he's not going to put the kind of money it looks like he's not willing to put the kind of money to get Kyle Busch in one of his cup cars like he was willing to do with his older brother many years ago, which would be a game changer for that organization and for Ford. I think similarly, I don't think he's willing to put in the money to really take that massive step that would be necessary to really move up into the higher echelon and battle those big three teams. I mean, maybe it's just not feasible anyway, but for what they are, I guess that's a good thing, right? I mean, I guess that's where we're at with Haas. Considering where they were a year ago, we're in a good place.
Oh, yeah, mate. I'll say, if you think about what Haas were this time last year, with Mazepin Senior basically convinced that Schumacher had a better chassis than his son, and threatening to pull his money. No, mate, your son is just a bit of a shit driver.
Yeah.
Couldn't hack it in F1. That's what it was. And you can throw all the temper tantrums you want. It won't. You can't fix stupid.
Yeah.
And you can take a shit and you can roll it in chocolate sprinkles and hundreds and thousands. It's still a shit, and that's what Mazepin was. So that's one of the best things that could have ever happened to that team was getting rid of that parasite. And he's absolute bell end of a father. They were just they were as bad as each other, and they're just not nice people, and they're just horrible. But they're gone, and they got K-Mac back, and the team is going from strength to strength. Schumacher's being mentored by Vettel like his dad did to Vettel sort of 10, 15 years ago. It's just nice to see that the team have sort of they're sort of like getting back up there. I think for them this year, perhaps they haven't had the results they would have liked, especially given sort of how strong the start to the season was. They've had some big reliability issues again with the Ferrari powertrain and everything. So they've had a very up and down season, but the pace is there. It seems everybody just looks happy at Haas. Gunter Steiner looks happy because he hasn't got the threat of a Russian oligarch hanging over his head. He hasn't got an absolute spunk bucket in the second seat. He's got someone who can actually drive and someone who he knows and is experienced. He's just it's just nice to see them doing well again, man. Because I quite like Haas. I like them when they came in. I like what they were about. And then obviously the whole rich energy thing sapped them. And then by the time they got to 2021, I think they were on the brink of leaving F1. And I think if it wouldn't have worked out for them this year, they'd be out. I think Gene Haas would have pulled the plug.
Yeah, they're the way that this team has gone, the way that it's kind of gone downhill, the rich energy thing with like bad sponsorship decisions and bad driver decision is akin to what Gene Haas did here in the U.S. with his NASCAR program. He started small, had what is now Xfinity Series, which is like AAA, which is like Formula 2 program. And then he decided he wanted to go to the Cup Series, and he started with one car in 2003 with the old Net Zero internet company. And they grew as the years. He started with one car, ran for 3 years in the Cup Series, had Hendrick support, kind of like he has Ferrari support, and then built the 2 cars, but then their cars were terrible. And they were so bad. And then, of course, Gene Haas went and did time for tax evasion and crap. Which allowed Chevrolet and Hendrick Motorsports to make an offer to one Anthony Wayne Stewart that he couldn't refuse, which is 51% ownership for zero investment of a NASCAR team. He could bring all of his people he wanted, get sponsorship, and do all that. And what is now Stewart Haas Racing exists today, and now they're with Ford and all that. The point I'm trying to make is Gene Haas basically had a team that was going to get run into the ground and had nothing, had no value. They were a bottom end team. That's essentially where they were. As Tom was saying, they were done. Even with the Concord agreement, I'm sure he could have paid the money out to not be around. But they weren't going to be around. But now they will be. What that means, we'll see what the upgrades they bring at Spa this coming weekend, if the car will be able to compete, depending on certain circuits as we get into the last 9 races of the season. They're a very hit or miss, like a lot of race teams this year, hit or miss based on circuits. So who knows what they'll be, but the positive energy there is a good sign. American energy is good with American drivers that have some potential there in Formula 2 and Formula 3. There is still the specter of that option happening, even though they're not in the Ferrari junior program. I think Kevin Magnussen will be able to kind of call his own shot, though, because he's a good dude and he's a steadying force to an organization that needed it. Mick Schumacher now losing his mentor in Vettel, leaving the sport, which is something we'll go over probably as the rest of the year goes on. Probably is a depressing thing for him. Hopefully Kevin and him keep on building their relationship, and he can kind of look at him as a mentor as well, because Kevin had to drive under his dad is a great sports car racer who also struggled in Formula One for a period of time in his life when he got hurried up very young to Formula One and didn't get the greatest shake, and then made a legendary sports car career. So maybe they can get on in that sense. So now we went over the bottom 5 teams. So let's get into Daniel Ricciardo. Right now, for all intents and purposes, Daniel Ricciardo, who has won double-digit Grand Prix in Formula One, did win McLaren's last Formula One race at the Italian Grand Prix last year, is not going to be in Formula One next year.
I don't think so.
He's had a good career. It hasn't really worked out at McLaren for whatever reason, and it's depressing in one end, but on the other end, it's kind of in the same realm as we talked about Alonso's career decisions. Yes, the decision to leave Red Bull was the right one, because he was never going to be the number 1 driver there with Max there. Now, going to Renault, they were building something, and Alpine has shown to a point that they're decent. They might be that next team behind the top 3 teams in Formula One, essentially. But he decided he was going to make essentially a lateral move to McLaren, who then, of course, got Mercedes power units again. But what he didn't realize was McLaren is building their organization around Lando Norris. Now, is it because of that? Is it because maybe Danny is not in the same mind space as he used to be? How do we explain this drop off in productivity to the point where now there's this whole controversy about him being replaced by the next great Australian driver in Oscar Piastri, and or staring at the possibility of going right back to Alpine maybe next year?
Honestly, it's because he has struggled to adapt to the cars that he's moved to. So he got very used to how the Red Bull was set up when he was there 4 years. He got very used to how the braking system was on the rest of it, and that's the big thing. The big thing with Danny Rick, we always saw him as king of the late breakers, but he just hasn't adapted, and he was too used to what he had, and he couldn't he couldn't move with the times basically, because cars change, and they changed out the years, and going to a different team, different environment, different expectations, all the rest of it. It didn't work out, and then when he announced he was going to McLaren, there were rumors about him going to McLaren before he went to Alpine. Because Zach Brown does like him. He obviously sees him as a sort of like marketing ploy, basically. Um, he's a nice guy. People like Danny Rick, but there are only so many seats in F1, and he's not young. He's in his 30s. He's what, 34, I think, 33, 34, maybe a bit younger than that. He's been in F1 for 10 years now, and I don't even think he's won races in the double digits. I think he won 7 at. Yeah. I think he won 7 at Red Bull, and then he won 1 with McLaren. I could be mistaken, but he's just he's just not lived
Yeah,
up
it's
to the
8.
hype.
My fault. He has 8 wins.
Yeah, I thought so. Because it seems like not very much given how long he was at Red Bull, and all the rest of it. And yes, I know. Obviously he won for McLaren in Monza, and he did well that weekend. He's had a few weekends where he's done well, but he's had so many weekends where he's just been shit. And it's just like, Lando has been so on the pace and so consistent, and Danny Rick has just been slow and just off the pace, and just can't get a lap together, can't get to grips with the car. And we all hoped that the new regulation change would help him, and we get settled. But no, it hasn't at all. It's the same old story yet again, and he's just his time is up. He needs to go.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, but I think Zach Brown's hedging on the notion of getting Oscar Piastri, who will have that hunger and that energy and jump right into the car and kind of mate with Lando Norris's energy that he brings to the program.
Yeah.
And they're just going to kind of play off of each other. And they both are very young and youthful, and it's going to bring that exuberance that McLaren needs, because they're, it's an old school team too. We could get into the history of their program and all the world champions and all, but they haven't had a world champion since Lewis in 2008. They've been in position, they've had chances, but not to the same extent as like a Red Bull, Ferrari, or even Mercedes now. They're not the same team anymore.
No.
And they have a lot of new pieces, a lot of new players, but if they were to confirm Piastri, and they have this program, and then they figure out where everybody's going driver wise. They have a program, because Lando Norris is solid. I mean, has he had as good of a year this year as he had last year? No, but the reality is he's kicking the crap out of his teammate. And essentially that's what he's done for 2 years, a year and a half. So it was more of a balance when it was him and Carlos Sainz, honestly. But I think Lando maybe was still working on his craft. But they had a great balance, and they had a great relationship. And I think that's what we have to look at. Can Piastri and Norris build that kind of rapport? Kind of, I don't think that, I'm not sure Piastri is a big funny guy, he likes joking around. I'm not sure about that. But if they could build that kind of rapport, you saw the potential and where the team was. They kept on rising up and kept on getting better and better. And that's what McLaren needs at this point, because right now they're losing to Alpine, even with Alplan walking out the door, and Esteban Ocon, which we'll get into in a sec, that they're generally not as consistent, like they're interesting, but, I think McLaren should be well ahead of them, honestly. I think they have the better car, but Alpine maximizes their performances better, and that's why they're up by 4 points as we stand with 9 races to go in the World Championship. So I mean, Ocon, we can get into because we already talked about El Plan a bunch earlier. Ocon right now is 8th in points. He's ahead of Alonso by what's it called? 30 points actually, or no, not 30 points. 12 points, or no, 17. I'm like, God. Can't even see it. All these damn numbers. Norris is 7th. He's 30 points ahead of 35 ahead of Alonso. But basically, Alpine has done a better job this year. I guess Alonso had mechanical issues. Both cars have had mechanical issues this year. But the Renault power unit has not been as bad this year as it has been maybe in previous years. Yes, they did get that win at the Hungarian Grand Prix last year. The one whatever finish they got. But I think Ocon now knows, because Gasly signed back for AlphaTauri, that he's not really worried about his seat. So maybe that gives him a little bit more comfort. Now that Piastri isn't going to be in the other seat, I think that also puts him at ease, because Piastri could and probably was faster than him. And Alonso leaving means either they're going to bring some other development driver from Formula 2, or they're going to bring Ricciardo back. And at that point, is that the best way for this this team to be going in the future? Because who knows what the rest of the season is going to bring, Tom. But I'm not sure. I really am not sure as Esteban Ocon as a lead driver. I really do not believe he's a lead driver. He's a solid number 2. He's going to make the mistakes of a number 2. But they need somebody big. And I mean, Alonso's washed up, whatever. Ricciardo looks like he's washed up. They can't really bring anybody else out of their driver development program. What are they going to do? They're going to go and call Felipe Drogovic randomly and say, hey, you want to be in Formula One? Like, I don't understand what their plan is for the long term. It really, I mean, they're talking about, we're going to have our new hypercar, and we're going to keep some of our development drivers and drive the hypercar. I'm like, you probably want to find 1 or 2 guys that can actually compete in Formula One, since the one guy you had that could compete in Formula One doesn't even want to drive for you. And Guan Yu Zhou left your program, and Fernando Alonso left your program too.
They're running out of drivers.
Yeah.
They've gone from having 3 drivers to go into 2 seats, having 1 driver across 2 seats. Yeah, with obviously Piastri going as well. I agree with you about Ocon though. It's just, he's decent, but he's not. He just doesn't seem to be like World Championship material. And given he won GP3, and I think he won GP2. Just gonna have a quick look. He's just sort of like not really set, sort of like not really set the world alight. He won GP3. That's right. He then went to DTM for 2016 when he was reserve driver at Renault, and then he got moved to Manor Racing.
Yeah,
that's right. He didn't even race in GP2 because he was competing against Luca Giotto, someone who's sort of fallen off the face of the earth.
Yeah.
Ocon, he's just he's been decent, and he arguably lucked into that win last year. I'm not going to go over it because it's been over a year. But I think there's a reason that Mercedes didn't really sort of like keep tabs on him in the same way that they did keep tabs on George Russell, because he's just not the same caliber.
Exactly.
So Ocon's a sort of interesting one. I think he's just there to appease the French public because he's a French driver in a French back team, and Renault is owned.
But there's Stellantis still,
they're owned by the people.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm just looking forward to seeing what happens with Alpine. I don't really care for them, if I'm honest.
It doesn't really matter to me either, unless they were to get somebody that would be a little bit more interesting. I love Daniel Ricciardo, he's done, and that's not going to work, really. It's not a long-term solution, and it really defeats the purpose, of what they have, because of 84 different driver development people. Now I'm curious because I went and read off the Red Bull people, so now I'm curious about their academy.
They've had a lot come through, and Again, sort of people have sort of like come and gone. The persist. They've. I say bring back Julian Palmer.
Oh boy, that would be the thing. That would be it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, so what is it? So it's gone. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm used to doing longer form things, so I guess I get off on tangents that way. That's kind of how the GSP works, unfortunately. Yeah, doing Ollie Caldwell, Caio Collet, Victor Martins, and then Alpine affiliate. I've never even heard of three of those. Abby Pulling, the woman, W Series driver. Okay, yeah, so they don't really have anybody right now that could do anything. I think Martins might be the one that has a chance, but he's a couple of years away. We went over fifth and fourth in the constructors. So Ferrari, best car for parts of this year. I think the drivers have both shown great pace, one lap pace in qualifying, but they've made their own errors in this situation. I mean, they're still second in the constructors and they're second in the world championship and all that. But I mean, the whole Ferrari is a vibe, and it's a vibe that is very depressing and very disturbing. Because Charles Leclerc is sitting there, has 3 wins, but really there should be more. Carlos Sainz got his maiden Formula One win. He has more podiums than Charles Leclerc, but my goodness, Ferrari has figured out a way, and that's essentially been the thing ever since 2007, when they were still the big pieces of, Schumacher's Ferrari were still there, and they won that world championship because McLaren fucked it up. It's kind of not been the way for Ferrari, and it's been going on for 15 years.
Ferrari don't know how to win. Yeah. That's the issue. We've seen it time and time again with them this season. It's like, why in the name of fuck do they put Leclerc out on the hards in Hungary? It's like they saw Alpine went out on them and they were massively struggling for pace. Max was coming through on softs and A, his tires weren't burning up that much, and B, he was holding really good pace. So why the hell did they pit Leclerc and put him on hards and actually leave him out to dry? It says a lot that Max was able to overtake him, spin, get past, catch him, and overtake him again.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's just... I mean, I'm not even going to go into the strategy because it's just
its own episode.
Yeah, mate, it's a walking meme by this point.
Yeah.
It's just like, how can a team so big and have so much history get it so wrong?
All the time.
Yeah, all the time. It's not just once, it's again and again and again. It's like when they were trying to bring in Sainz to pit him when he was battling wheel to wheel with Perez in France, and then they were also saying to Sainz in Silverstone that you've got to leave 10 car lengths. Yeah. And Sainz said, stop inventing. It's just like, it's just, I just don't get how you can get it so wrong.
It's sad, really. I mean, we've spent a lot of time on the back end of the grid, but we probably should have spent it's part of why we probably needed an outline. We'll do it next time. But this Ferrari team, they're going to wonder at the end of this year, because I honestly believe the next team we're going to talk about is going to overtake them in the Constructors' Championship by the end of this year, because they're on the upswing. Their strategy seems to be on point, and their pace is starting to get better. And I think, to be honest, level-wise in terms of drivers, they're right there, if not better, overall. And Ferrari, what is Ferrari going to say after you had the dominant car at the first race of the year, and there's been moments this year where they've had the best car, and you're going to finish third in the Constructors' Championship? That is unacceptable for the amount of money they put into Formula One. They'll come up with other excuses. There'll be all kinds of excuses. Say, oh, we have a hypercar program. We got this, we got that. No.
So
you fucked this shit up.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what program they got. They've just completely fucked up for Leclerc this year. And I tell you what else doesn't help with Ferrari, right, is they've got some of the most passionate, loyal fan base F1 has ever seen, the Tifosi. But if you saw Ferrari on social media, Ferrari's page on social media after Leclerc won at Silverstone, oh my God, people were begging for their blood.
Yeah.
It's just, they were saying congrats on throwing away this and that and all the rest of it. It's Ferrari, they're just, oh god, they're just. Mate, I just don't get it because when you look at Mercedes 9 times out of 10 absolute strategic masterclass, and then they would listen to the drivers as well. Okay, yeah, they got it wrong a couple of times. Red Bull 9 times out of 10, it's Hannah Schmitz, I think she's called, who's their head of strategy.
Yeah, and
9 times out of 10,
she is
absolutely nails the strategy. Look at Hungary, absolutely, 10th to first, absolute perfection that was. One of Max's best ever races.
Russia last year, they didn't have
last
the pace.
To seconds.
That's the championship thing, and I think this is where we'll leave it, because the fact of the matter is we need to really spend more time talking about these top three, because this is where the championship lies, and it speaks to where these three teams are at with their level of strategy and what they're doing and why they are where they are. There's inside stories and all that, and it's more towards what our fandom is too. So what we'll do here is we'll call it off, at least for this episode, this special episode of the F1 Uncensored Roundup here. From Tom, you can go and let us know everything F1. You're basically all over the place. So where can we find you and your content?
Yeah, we're pretty much everywhere. So we're across social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Not that I have that or ever use it or will ever install it, because I don't understand it for a start. The handles at Join the F1 or Everything F1. You search for that. There's the website, everythingf1.com, the YouTube channel, which is getting a revamp, Everything F1, and our Everything F1 podcast, which is on wherever you listen to a podcast, you'll find it. Basically, I can't list them all, anyway, listen to a podcast, you'll find it.
Yeah, and for me, you can find me at Philip G. Matthew on Twitter. You can find my show at Gripstrip Pod on Twitter, the Gripstrip Podcast. We're basically anywhere you can find podcasts. My co-host is at JP Huffine. We talk about motorsports. We talk about all different motorsports all over the world. We talk about NFL football, talk about other sports here in America and over the world, since I've become a Premier League guy as well, on the down low. So we talk about all kinds of things on the Gripstrip Podcast. It's been fun. We're kind of going off on tangents on some of the back end of the grid. We probably lost the plot in terms of what we really should have talked about, but I guess it's what we're working on. We're early days here on this project. So as we get along, I think more time, the Phil and Tom experiment, I think we'll have more time and maybe arrange more time to do it, so then we can kind of deep dive, because both of our history, our minds work in weird ways, of course, and we'll go off on tangents on things that we remember. So Tom, thanks for the time. I know that you've been a little under the weather, so I'm glad that you felt good enough, and it's nice to see the decor in your parents' house. I'm blocking out my decor, even though it's pretty cool. We went over it on the show earlier, pre-show, and we'll be back again shortly, maybe in the next week or two. I think it probably wouldn't be a bad idea after that, the next three races on the European swing, because we'll have a little bit more content to work with amongst those three teams that we really need to work on. And maybe we'll have some more information in regards to who's going where in Formula One. So for Tom, I'm Phil. Take care, and we'll see you next time.